My son's wife looked me dead in the eye at my own birthday dinner and said, "You don't mind sitting with the kids, do you? It's just easier this way." I stood there for a moment, holding my little evening bag, wearing the dress I'd bought specifically for tonight, and I thought, easier for whom exactly? Let me back up. My name is not important. What's important is that I am 67 years old. I raised my son by myself after his father walked out when the boy was 9, and I have spent the better part of 4 decades making sure that child had everything he needed. Everything. Piano lessons he quit after 6 months. A car at 16, used but reliable. College tuition. All 4 years, no loans, no strings attached. And 3 years ago, when he came to me with his business plan printed out on 40 pages of copy paper, eyes bright the way they used to get on Christmas morning, I wrote him a check for $180,000. I did not ask for it back. I did not ask for anything. His wife's name is Gwendolyn. She goes by Gwen. But early on, she told me she preferred Gwendolyn from family, which I took as my first hint about how things were going to go. My son's name is Patrick. He is 41 years old, and somewhere between loving me genuinely and being completely unable to stand up to his wife, he has chosen, time and again, to stand with her. I want to be fair. I have tried to be fair. Gwendolyn is not a monster. She is organized, she is driven, she keeps a beautiful home, and she loves my son in her way. But there is a kind of woman who enters a family and quietly, methodically, rearranges the furniture, not just the physical kind. And by the time you realize what's happened, you're sitting in the corner of a room that used to be yours, wondering how you got there. It started small, the way these things always do. Holidays shifted to her parents' house first, then alternating years, then somehow her parents every year with us visiting them on the way for an afternoon. My birthday dinners went from a reservation at a place I chose to a family gathering Gwendolyn organized, which I told myself was generous until I started noticing that generous had terms attached to it. But the night I'm telling you about, my 67th birthday, that was the night something in me finally, quietly, broke open. Patrick had called 2 weeks before. "Mom, Gwen wants to do something special for your birthday this year. There's a new restaurant downtown, Thornfield. You know the one? The one that opened in the old bank building?" I did know it. I'd wanted to go there for months. "She's going to make a reservation. We'll do a whole dinner, bring the kids." I was touched. Genuinely. I told him that sounded wonderful. I told him to tell Gwendolyn thank you. What I did not know, what no one told me, was the specific shape of the reservation. My granddaughters are 7 and 4. Sweet girls, both of them, and I love them more than I have words for. Rosie is the older one, serious and bookish already, and the little one is Cassie, who has her father's laugh and her mother's eyes. I was looking forward to seeing them. I had gifts in my bag. Small things, because it was my birthday, but I can never help bringing something for the girls. We met outside Thornfield at 7 o'clock on a Saturday in October. Patrick hugged me, told me I looked beautiful, and meant it. I could see it in his face. Rosie ran to me immediately, and Cassie grabbed my leg, and I thought, this is lovely. This is exactly what I wanted. We walked inside together. The hostess smiled and said, "Reservation for Holt?" And Gwendolyn stepped forward and said yes. And then the hostess said, "Right this way. We have you at 2 tables. 2 tables. I thought I'd misheard. I looked at Patrick. He was looking at the floor. The hostess led us to a large round table near the center of the room, set for 2, with a candle and a small arrangement of flowers. And then, about 15 feet away, a slightly larger rectangular table set for 3, with a booster seat already in place for Cassie. Gwendolyn turned to me brightly. "We thought it would be so much easier this way. Patrick and I can have a nice adult dinner, and you can enjoy the girls." She gestured toward the rectangular table like she was presenting me with something. "You always say you don't get enough time with them." I did say that. I do say that. But I want you to think about what she had done. She had made a reservation at a restaurant I had longed to visit called it my birthday dinner, and seated me at the children's table. At my own birthday dinner, at a restaurant she had booked on the credit card I had given Patrick for family expenses. I found that out later. But I want you to hold on to that detail for a moment. Rosie looked up at me with her serious little eyes and said, "Grammy, we're sitting together." I smiled at her. I said, "I see that, sweetheart." And then I looked at my son. He finally looked up from the floor. There was something in his face. Not quite guilt, not quite apology. Just a kind of helpless knowledge that this was wrong and he had let it happen anyway. I have seen that look before. I have excused it before. I have told myself he is caught in the middle. He is trying, he loves me, and all of that is probably true. But love without action is just a feeling, and feelings do not sit at a table alone on their birthday. "Patrick," I said, very quietly, "can I speak with you for a moment?" Gwendolyn said, "We should probably get seated. The girls are." "One moment," I said, not loudly, not rudely. Patrick followed me a few steps toward the entrance. I asked him, calmly, whether he had known about the two-table arrangement before tonight. He looked at me for a long second and said, "Gwen thought it would be." "Yes or no?" I said. He said yes. I want to tell you what that yes cost me. Because I think women of a certain age are expected to absorb these costs quietly and redistribute the pain somewhere private, somewhere no one has to see it. We are expected to smile and sit down and cut Cassie's chicken into pieces and call it enough. And for a long time, for most of my life, honestly, I did exactly that. But I am 67 years old and I have run out of quiet places to put other people's bad behavior. I went back to the table, the adult table, where Gwendolyn was already seated and studying her menu. I placed my hand on the back of the empty chair and I said, "Gwendolyn, I want to make sure I understand. This table, the nice one, the one with the candle, this is for you and Patrick." She looked up. "Well, yes, we thought you'd love spending the time with." "And my table," I said, "the one with the booster seat, is where you'd like me to sit. On my birthday. It's really not a big deal, it's just." "Who made the reservation?" I asked. A pause. "I did." "On which card?" Her expression shifted just slightly. "Patrick's card." "Patrick's card," I said. "That would be the card I pay for." Patrick had gone very still. "I'm going to ask you something," I said to Gwendolyn, and I kept my voice so calm I surprised even myself. "And I want you to think before you answer. If you had arranged a birthday dinner for your own mother, would you have seated her at the children's table while you sat at the nice one with the candle?" She opened her mouth. She closed it. "I thought so," I said. I picked up my purse. I looked at my son, who I drove to every baseball practice, who I sat with through 2 surgeries, who I handed $180,000 because I believed in him. And I said, "I love you, Patrick. I'm going home." Rosie said, "Grammy?" I crouched down to her level and I kissed her forehead. I told her Grammy wasn't feeling well, and that I would see her very soon, and that I loved her all the way to the moon. She accepted this with the grave, generous understanding that 7-year-olds sometimes have. Cassie waved at me with one hand and grabbed a breadstick with the other. I walked out of Thornfield on my 67th birthday into a cold October evening, and I stood on the sidewalk for a moment. And here is the thing I want you to know. I did not cry. I wanted to. There was something pressing against the back of my eyes, the way tears do when they're deciding. But I did not cry. I got in my car, I drove myself home, and when I got inside I changed into my comfortable clothes, heated up some soup I'd made earlier in the week, and watched a documentary I'd been saving. And then I made 2 phone calls. The first was to my bank the next morning to discuss removing Patrick from the secondary card. The second was to my attorney to review a few things about my estate plan that I'd been meaning to update for some time. I want to be clear, I did not do these things in anger. Anger is quick and hot, and it burns itself out. What I felt was something more durable, a kind of clarity. The feeling of a window being cleaned from the outside. Suddenly, you can see through it properly. Patrick called me the next day. He said he was sorry. He said he should have said something, should have pushed back, should have told Gwendolyn it wasn't right. I told him I agreed with all of that. I told him I loved him. I told him that love between adults requires more than good intentions, and that I needed him to understand this wasn't something I was going to forget and move quietly past. Not this time. He asked what I needed. I told him I needed him to be my son, not just Gwendolyn's husband, that those two things do not have to be in conflict, but that he was going to have to stop acting like they were, because I had reached the end of my willingness to be the one who absorbs the cost every single time. He was quiet for a while. Then he said, "I know, Mom. I don't know what he and Gwendolyn worked out between them. That's their business. What I know is that a few weeks later, Patrick called and asked if he could take me to dinner. Just him. No Gwendolyn, no children. Just the two of us. And we went to Thornfield, which I had still never actually gotten to experience, and we sat at a table by the window, and we talked for 3 hours the way we used to when he was younger, and the world felt more open between us. He paid. He did not use my card. And at the end of the evening, when we were putting on our coats, he said, "I'm sorry it took me so long to get here." I didn't say anything for a moment. I just looked at my son, this man I made, this person I would still do anything for, and I thought about how complicated it is to love someone and also require something of them. "You're here now," I said. "That matters. I am not telling you this story to say I did everything right. Maybe there was a kinder way to handle that night. Maybe I could have sat at the children's table and held it together and let it go. But here's what I know about letting things go. Sometimes you let go so many times that you let go of yourself, and I was not willing to do that anymore. I am 67 years old. I have been a daughter, a wife, a single mother, a grandmother. I have held families together, and I have paid for things, and I have shown up, and shown up, and shown up, and I have learned, later than I should have, but I have learned that showing up for yourself is not the same as abandoning the people you love. It is, in fact, the only way to love them honestly. Tell me honestly, have you ever been placed at the wrong table? Not just at dinner, anywhere. At work, in your family, in a friendship. And did you stay? Did you move your own chair? I want to know, because I think more of us have been there than ever say so out loud. I hope if you're there right now, you know you don't have to stay. Not because the people who put you there are necessarily evil. Sometimes they're just people who got comfortable. People who stopped looking at what they were doing because no one ever made it cost them anything. Make it cost something. Not out of spite. Not out of anger. Just out of the simple, quiet knowledge that you are worth a table by the window, a candle, the good chair. And you always were. There's a moment, and I think most people have had it, even if they haven't named it, when you realize that what just happened to you was not an accident. Gwendolyn did not forget to include me at the main table. Patrick did not fail to notice that something was wrong. These were choices, quiet ones, made in advance, with care and planning. A booster seat had already been placed at my table before I arrived. Someone had thought that through. That is not an oversight. That is a decision about who you are and what you're worth, translated into logistics. And here's what I've come to understand about that kind of decision. It only works if you accept it. The moment I walked out of Thornfield that night, the entire arrangement collapsed. Not because I was angry. I told you I wasn't, not really. But because I refused to ratify it with my presence. There is a cause and there is an effect, and the effect of placing someone at the wrong table is entirely dependent on whether they sit down. I have spent a long time being a person who sits down, who absorbs, who tells herself that keeping the peace is a form of love. And maybe it is sometimes, but I think there is a version of keeping the peace that is really just a failure of honesty. Honesty with yourself about what you will and won't accept, and honesty with the people you love about what it costs them when they treat you as optional. What Patrick needed from me that night was not my forgiveness. He needed my clarity. He needed to understand, in terms he could not talk himself out of, that his choices had consequences. That is not cruelty. That is, I think, one of the most decent things one person can do for another, to tell the truth about what is happening, to not protect someone from the weight of their own behavior. I loved my son enough to make it real for him, and I think that is a harder, more honest kind of love than the kind that smiles and cuts the children's chicken and says nothing. There is also something I want to say about knowing yourself well enough to act. It took me 67 years to walk out of a restaurant on my birthday. I am not proud of how long it took, but I understand it because building that kind of inner steadiness, the kind that doesn't require anyone else's permission or validation, that is not something that happens overnight. It is built slowly, out of 1,000 smaller moments where you choose to see clearly instead of conveniently, where you ask yourself what is actually true, not just what is comfortable. I was not always good at that. I got better. And then there is the matter of going back, of Patrick calling, of Thornfield, the second time, a table by the window. That part matters too, because walking away is only half of it. The other half is remaining open. Not endlessly, not unconditionally, but open to the possibility that people can surprise you. Patrick did. He sat across from me for 3 hours, and he was present in a way he hadn't been in years. And I thought, this is what I was asking for all along, not the apology, just this. I don't know what the rest of it looks like. Families are long and complicated, and nothing is ever fully resolved. But I know that I am sitting at the right table now, and I know that I put myself there. That's enough.